everyone. Welcome to the problem slide of our free pitch deck course. For those of you who have already been following along our pitch deck course, you should probably skip ahead about a minute or 30 seconds or so as we go through the introductions. To those of us who are new to this free online course on how to create a pitch deck, welcome. This course is available on kruzeconsulting.com/pitch-deck. KRUZE consulting.com/pitch-deck. My name is Healy Jones. I am the Vice President of FP&A at Kruze Consulting. I'm a former venture capitalist, have made over 40 plus investments in startups, including 3 unicorns and quite a few that have been acquired for hundreds of millions of dollars. Kruze Consulting is one of the leading finance and accounting consulting firms serving venture capital-backed startups. Our clients raise over $1 billion a year. We are not in the business of helping make pitch decks. However, we do look at a lot of them and do consult around the finance portion of these pitch decks. So we've brought in one of the leading experts on pitch decks creations, a pitch deck consultant by the name of Haya Camps. He actually is not only a leading consultant, he has written the book called Pitch Perfect, which you can get on Amazon. Hi, you want to give your quick background?
Yeah, sure. Good to be here, Healy. I'm Haya. I have the world's weirdest background. I have a journalism degree. I spent a bunch of time in hard journalism, was at TechCrunch for a while, and then kind of ended up doing all sorts of things. I founded 6 or 7 startups. I was in venture capital for a while, helping a portfolio of about 100 startups in all sorts of things, really. And then when I left all of that, I went into working as a pitch coach. And in that capacity, I'm helping companies that generally have the company side of what they're doing together, finding the story and telling that story in a way that works for venture capitalists. It turns out it's a pretty different thing to pitch your company for sales than to pitching it to VCs. And so I'm helping bridge that gap, basically.
Awesome. And where can people find you online?
Haya.me, HAJE.me.
Perfect. All right. And as we go through this, we are going to show an example, actually several examples of pitch decks that we like. And we have created 2 free downloadable templates, which again are available at the URL I mentioned earlier. One is intended to be an enterprise-focused SaaS example, and the other is more of a B2C focused SaaS example. So we're going to go through that. So first of all,
I just want to kind of highlight as well that the B2B example we've created especially for this course, and the B2C example is the one that I'm kind of using in my book. So we've both spent a bunch of time on making these templates pretty amazing. And it's a good idea to look at both of them to get a couple of different ways of telling the story and to figure out what works the best for your company.
Excellent. And so this slide we recommend as basically after your cover slide, the next slide. So either the second or first slide, depending on how you want to count it. Why is this slide so important in the pitch deck?
Oh, goodness. So to really understand why the problem slide is so important, you have to kind of think about who your audience is. And, VCs come in all sorts of flavors and sizes and colors. And the point that it really happens with this is you can't really assume anything about the person you're sitting across the table from. And if somebody doesn't understand why this problem is worth solving, you kind of have a problem there.
Right. So you are sitting with the venture capitalist who sees, if they're good, 10 plus pitches a day. And in fact, they might even have just received this pitch deck over email and not even had the opportunity to talk to you yet. They're trying to see if they want to talk to you or not. This is the slide that they first see. That's how important it is. The slide needs to be compelling enough to get them to want to take that meeting. The problem has to be crystal clear enough. It's got to be worth solving. There's got to be real market. And, you've been in these meetings yourself as a VC. This is the moment where you get the venture capitalist to put their phone down and actually start to look at you and pay attention.
Yeah, totally. I mean, if it's just an email screen, if they don't understand that it's a problem worth solving and that people are willing to pay for that problem, there's no investment, right? There's so many little things. It's so many. I keep saying this, whenever you're in a room full of entrepreneurs, there's 200 ideas. Ideas are dirt cheap because there's so many annoyances and problems in our everyday lives that there's always worth solving some sort of problem, right? The problem is a lot of these problems people are not willing to pay for, or they're like, well, it's annoying, but whatever, right? I do this once a year and it's not really worth me paying for somebody else to solve this. And so for a company to you kind of have to think about how a VC thinks about this, right? Is this a space where it's worth spending a bunch of time and money to solve this problem? If that's not the case, then there's nothing, basically. And exactly. I see a lot of founders that kind of fall into that trap of thinking, oh, well, you kind of get this standard thing, right? We're like, hey, how about, turnstiles at the BART station? It's like, yeah, that's a problem, but nobody's willing to pay money to solve that. So it's an interesting challenge to ask yourself. And it's particularly challenging for startup founders because, you've spent so much time and energy trying to solve this problem that it kind of becomes completely invisible to you that whether or not this is actually worth solving. So just to kind of set the scene and to kind of have it as a starting point of your story, it's like, hey, this is something that's really worth solving. It's a really powerful way to open the conversation.
Right. And another thing that you highlighted here is thinking about the audience. The audience for this slide is going to change as you move through a venture capital fundraise process.
Absolutely.
So initially, it's probably shared over email, right? Yep. So it's got to stand on its own. You may have a meeting with a VC. It might be a junior VC who knows nothing and is just a gatekeeper. It might be a partner who's worked in this industry for 40 years. It's got to support both of those. And then as you move through the process, hopefully you eventually get to do, for most firms, a full pitch to a group of partners or all of the partners of the investment committee. And you can expect that those partners all have different areas of expertise. Some may be great investors and they may know nothing at all about this problem, about the customer, et cetera, et cetera. So you've got to not only hook those people, you've got to hook the person who might have been a founder in the space and been really successful and knows everything about it. So this is a really challenging slide, a really challenging slide.
Yeah. And just to kind of say a little bit more about that, there will be moments where you are pitching, especially, so for example, you might send this deck to a partner who is really deep into this, but partners are extremely busy and they might pass it to an associate and they might just say, hey, this is an interesting startup, take a look. But unless they have some context about why this is an interesting startup, so remember that the audience is going to shift. And as you just mentioned, in the final kind of stages of an investment, you might be in front of the entire investment committee and you might be pitching your agricultural robotics technology company to somebody who only does crypto. And there's no reason why they would have a deep understanding of the challenges of ag tech, but it's your job as the founder to explain why this is worth solving, even to people who have no idea about this market at all.
Exactly. So let's dive in. The meat of the slide here is what is the problem that you are solving?
Yeah.
Right? What does the venture capitalist need to know about this problem so that they're psyched enough to want to keep the meeting going? So this is actually a pretty easy slide if there's a super obvious market. You don't have to talk too much about it. You can focus a little bit more on what your solution is. However, obvious, it doesn't matter if it's obvious to you. It matters that it's obvious to the audience. So you've probably been thinking about this space a ton as the founder, but the VC maybe hasn't. And one of the things, Hai, that you mentioned before is inviting the audience in case they don't know about it. Do you want to talk a little bit about what that means?
Yeah, I think there is this moment where, like, imagine you're Facebook, right? And you're building the future, like you're Zuckerberg, you have this very clear vision of what the future of the internet is going to be. And this startup makes no sense, right? MySpace is popular and like, well, how is anybody ever going to take on MySpace? And I imagine you get very similar challenges now. If you're trying to start an internet search engine, the investor will have a concept of Google and maybe a few other search engines, but they'd be like, okay, who are you to take on Google, kind of thing, right? So you have to kind of tell a really good story around both what the overall market is and where the market is going. We'll talk about that more in kind of the market slide. But for the actual problem piece, it's like, why, if you're a challenger brand, why are the incumbents struggling with solving this problem? Or if you are kind of creating a brand new market, like, why is now the right time to solve that market? And there's a few different ways of looking at that. I know in the kind of preparation for this, we were talking about Uber. Before Uber came along, there weren't really any good solutions for doing for just pressing a button on your phone to get a cab to turn up at your door. And as an investor, the pushback would be, well, why would anybody want that? I can just call a taxi company now and it'll be fine. Or, if you rewind even just a few years before that, nobody had smartphones. And so the market wasn't ready. And so there's a whole bunch of pieces of the puzzle that have to fall into place for your company to make sense. And in the problem slide, you have like an opportunity to kind of outline what are the bits and pieces of the puzzle that are now possible. That means that this has gone from something that people don't really care about to a real pain point that people are willing to pay real money to solve.
Exactly. So in a new market, that is the strategy. You have to help invite the venture capitalists or the audience in, explaining why now is the moment, why it matters to the customers, and it's a real pain point. It's something they're willing to pay money for. In an existing market, you should focus more on the nuance of how you are fitting in with the customer need. And you don't more, you're taking advantage of an existing market, but you have a better mousetrap. So I do love the Uber example, and I've got it here. So I'm going to share the screen for a second, and we can talk about the Uber example.
Yeah, I'd love that.
Great. So I am sharing the screen over here. Now, this is not ours. We found this on slideshare.net. I'll make it a full screen thing so you can see everything. So theoretically, this is one of Uber's first pitch decks back when it was called Uber Cab. And then they hit exactly into the problem statement. Okay, so they have two slides of the problem. All right, and the problem they're laying out, first of all, is that the current technology sucks. That's what this is right here. Current technology in this market is crap. Okay, then they talk about how it's a bad customer experience. So hailing is done by phone or hand, right? And I actually can remember this because I'm old enough to have to call to get a cab, and you never knew when they were going to show up. You didn't know where the driver was. It was pretty bad experience. And they're also showing that it's a bad experience on the cab driver side as well. And then,
and I actually really like this slide. If I can pop back to it for a sec. I really like this slide because what is happening here is that they're really, if you're calling a cab to your house, at least you have a firm address. That is relatively easy. If you're at a bar, sure, maybe the bar has an address and the cab drivers know where the bars are. If you are at a particular corner of a park, there is no way that taxi is going to show up, and you don't know how long it's going to be. You don't know if it's been canceled. If you walk to a payphone and call from there, it's a nightmare. And so this part of the pitch is really, really solid. They're really explaining why this particular product makes sense, and they're able to weave a story around the use cases and the examples for why this company needs to exist.
Exactly. And if I could tell a funny story, it was just completely not going to be helpful. So people should skip ahead 30 seconds if they don't want to hear my funny story. But I can remember back in 2000, New Year's Eve, I was out and may have had a few cocktails and then called the phone number to get a cab on my cell phone. It was too loud for me to hear. So I gave the address. I called them again a few minutes later. I called them again when I was outside. And the lady on the other end of the line said, "This is not a cab company. This is my house. Stop calling me." So it's how bad the experience was back then. And I take no blame.
Did she come and pick you up?
No, she didn't pick me up.
That's terrible customer service.
Exactly. And then the Uber has broken this up into another slide for their problem, which is the price. It's too expensive. So they have laid out basically three things. The current technology sucks. It's a bad customer experience, and the solution is too expensive. That's actually a pretty killer problem deck right there.
Yeah, I mean, if you're able to address those three things in your problem slide, so, and I think this is important to highlight. The purpose of the product slide is for the VC to put their phone away, as you said, and lean forward. It's like, okay, I've got to pay attention to this. And with the problem that some founders have is that they start telling their story. They're getting to a place where, some interesting stuff is happening. But the painful thing is, if the VC only leans forward about halfway through your pitch, they've missed the first half, right? And it becomes like one of those, oh yeah, did I have to pay attention? And I mean this with all the love in my heart, but if you work in venture capital, you are crazy, crazy busy. And you are going to, if it doesn't immediately strike your interest, you have 16 other meetings that week, and there's 10 board meetings you have that week. And it is a crazy, crazy job. And so on the one hand, should they be more professional? Absolutely. On the other hand, for you as a founder, it is your job to hook them in and drag them along, because other founders will be doing that, and they'll be doing it really, really well. So it's just kind of the professionalism and the art of pitching has shifted a lot over the years, and you have to keep up. It's really important.
Very important. And so let's show the other slide decks that we've created as demo examples. Again, you can get these for free on the website that we mentioned earlier. We have two. I'll share my screen again here. So we have two. Again, one is focused for an enterprise business, and one is an example for more of a consumer focused business. So this first one is for a made up startup that we're calling 4Ps. It's just Perfect Plumbing Partner Platform. We're trying to be a little silly with these ideas. We don't want you to fixate really on the idea. We're trying to more give you a template. And then the other one is for a beer delivery startup. What do we call this one again? What do you call this one? Oops, you're on mute there.
Oh, really good question. I can't remember.
Okay, well, I'll just scoot to the beginning then. What do we call it here? Beer Sub. There we go.
Beersub.com. Yeah.
Okay, great. Perfect. Okay, so let's.
Do you want to do that one more time so we can actually splice that in?
Yeah, sure. All right, great. Well, I'll start again. So we have, I just started sharing my screen, and we have two, again, demo pitch decks that you can get for free on the website. Okay. One is for a consumer-focused startup called Beer Sub, and the other is for a more enterprise-focused one called 4P, which is Perfect Plumbing Partner Platform. We're not trying to have you focus on the concept behind these. They're intended to be a little bit silly of companies. It's more, we're trying to show you the template, okay, and the sort of the flow and how to kind of weave a thread or a story throughout your deck. So please don't tear us apart for what these companies are about. We just made them up to try to be helpful here, okay? So let's start with Beer Sub. Hi, do you want to talk about what is on this slide? And I will make it big enough so that the audience can easily see it.
As Healy was saying, Beer Sub is kind of a joke. You know, you're not going to actually subscribe to a beer solution, or maybe you are. But what I wanted to talk about here with the problem slide here is to really kind of tease out some of the reasons why somebody might be interested in this, right? And so if I were presenting this slide, I would weave a story around why these things are important, right? People are eager to explore new beers, but there's too many choices. And I think that's something that everybody can kind of relate to. If you walk through like a Bevmo or something here in California, or like a big beer store, you have hundreds and hundreds of choices, and the labels are super pretty, but you have no idea what's good. And unless you have like a staff member there that can help you out, you're kind of struggling. You might do like a beer tasting or something, but it's actually legitimately hard to find something that fits your taste profile and all that kind of stuff. The other thing is, if you go to a liquor store or a supermarket, you know, it's the same thing, but there you don't have any advice, and that gets really complicated. And so really what this pitch is for is like, really, if you are interested in beer, but you're not willing to like sign up to become a full-on beer judge and do lots of training, there needs to be an in-between thing. And so the idea here is just to kind of create enough tension in the story that people are interested enough to think, hey, this might be something that is worth looking into. And yeah, so that's what the problem slide is here.
Again, and so the format that you can see on this is basically like a sort of hard-hitting headline. And then, you know, here we have 3 bullets. And this actually is somewhat similar to what you saw with the Uber example, where they had kind of 3 main issues or problem that they thought needed to get addressed. If we jump over to the 4Ps example, okay, you can see here again, we're sort of following the three bullet. But again, we're saying that the admin that a plumber or a handyman has to spend billing and scheduling meetings is actually disruptive of their ability to earn a living, which is when they're billing by the hour and actually doing work. Yep. And this manual billing problem and customer relationship management can actually result in an underwhelming customer experience. You may be undercharging customers because you're leaving money on the table. You might overcharge some. You might not be very quick at getting in touch with them. And then finally, like, plumbers are often really busy, or they actually have, they need more work. And so the solution can actually help plumbers load balance and find more opportunities. Now, again, the pitch that I just went through would not be one that would be good enough to raise venture capital funding. Okay, you need to do a much better job than this. But what we're trying to critically focus on here is that, like, current market has an issue. And then for this plumbing example, the way that a plumber would solve for this is hiring an administrative assistant or secretary, which would be, depending on where they are, 20 to maybe $50,000 a year of an expense. So you're sort of throwing out there that, hey, there's the people actually are solving this now, but it's really expensive in terms of what they're currently doing.
Yeah, totally. And I think if for people who've ever been in consulting or freelance business, you realize that these things are actually really universal. The admin, like the time you're not spent doing the actual work is just cost to you. And a lot of people who are very kind of vocationally oriented are really bad at admin. It's just kind of a universal truth there. And so all the time you're spending doing plumbing, that's where you make the money. But then you end up wasting all your time doing the other stuff. And the other odd truth is, when you're out doing jobs, the horrible thing that happens is that you're super busy, so you're not out there doing marketing and you don't get as much inbound. And so, you finish all your jobs and you look at your calendar and suddenly it's empty. And it's like, I don't have anything to do. And then you do all your marketing and suddenly you're super busy again. And so really what the pitch would be here, and the way you would tell this story as a pitch, is like you're evening out that curve. You're saying when you're doing work, there's still a way of getting more work. And when you're doing the actual work out in the customer land, you are kind of making the experience better, so you get more word of mouth. And so it kind of becomes like a marketing / admin story that you can start weaving throughout this pitch.
All right. So one thing that you can be tempting when you're presenting the problem is actually, instead of telling the problem, just giving your solution slide, which is a different slide, or given the market slide, which we think should be a different slide. And there even a competition slide, which could be a different slide, which should be a different slide, right? So this slide can kind of really bleed into those other things. Now you have to adjust this slide based on how much the audience is going to know about your market, right? So if they know nothing about the market and they think it's maybe like a $20 million a year market, like you probably want to tease that you're innovating in a $50 billion market category, or currently the customers are spending, on average $40,000 a year to fix this problem, like kind of proving that there's something out there. That doesn't have to be a bullet, that could be in the headline, or it's something maybe you can say orally if you're in a meeting. But again, like think about, okay, the venture capitalist is coming in. Do they know that this is a big market? Do they know that there's a willingness to pay? Think about those things, and be very careful about bleeding too much into your feature or demo slide, because without actually setting the table about how there's a problem here, your pitch can lose a lot of its awesomeness.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that the thing to really keep in mind that this is your teaser, right? This is your appetizer that really makes people go, oh, wait, I hadn't thought about this. That is like, there's two outcomes here. One is, oh, I've never heard about this. This is interesting. I'm going to pay attention. Or the other one is, oh, I know something about this space. And I think just from a psychology point of view, right? If you don't know anything about it, but you're a curious person, you're going to be like, okay, tell me more. This is interesting. If you do know something about it, a lot of people fall into this mode of like, okay, I'm gonna catch them out, right? I'm gonna see if I can catch them in saying something that wasn't right. And so this is, in both cases, is great, because people are engaged, they are listening, they are paying attention, maybe they're taking notes. That is like the thing you really want for this slide. And either way, it's kind of, you set yourself up for a win here.
Exactly.
And as you were just saying, it's really about what can you tease, what can you kind of line up. And for me, as a pitch coach, I really believe in telling like story arcs. And what that means is that you have like an example or a piece of the story that comes back several times throughout the story. And this is where you get a chance to set that up. So if you're talking about the plumber example, give the plumber a name. Bob is out there doing this, and Bob is really struggling, blah, blah, blah. And later in the story, you can talk about Bob again. And I think it's such a good way from a storytelling point of view to really tie it all together. So this is your chance to really kind of set the pieces for what's about to happen in the rest of your story.
Great. And you know what? You just teased something that is really important that we should kind of double click into, which is you should have talked to a bunch of customers by this point, or potential customers or people in the market. So to the extent you're going to go pitch a venture capitalist on an idea, and it's not something that you've been doing yourself at a big enterprise, you need to go and have talked to so many customers that you've done the market development, that you can prove that, hey, I've talked to 50 plumbers and they have all shared the same experience around X or Y. Those that have solved it have an intern who they love, or maybe it's their wife or their husband, or someone is actually solving this for them. And when they think about the opportunity cost of that person, that they could be earning a salary somewhere else, they actually understand that it's really expensive to solve. So you need to have talked to customers, and you can bring those anecdotes into this part of the pitch really and make it very profound or personal. And in fact, if you're selling to enterprise, this is even better, because you can say that you talk to, or you're used to run the XYZ thing at big company X, and this was a problem there, which is why you started this company. Or a bunch of your friends are running security at Fortune 500 companies, and they've been complaining about this. Like, you can weave that in here, but heaven forbid you should actually go to try to talk to the VC before having talked to potential customers, because they are going to call you out on it, and you're going to look really stupid. So one, talk to customers. Two, weave the anecdotes in throughout the entire the presentation. And this is a nice place to tease that.
Yeah, totally. And I think I kind of want to double down on that as well. So the beautiful thing about having really deep understanding, either through traction in your company, so you can talk about real customers, or even just having done a large number of customer interviews, is that you can talk with great. So the VC is going to want to invest on big numbers, right? So individual stories almost don't matter, but VCs are humans. And there's a reason why, look, if you read the press and there's been some sort of a big disaster, they interview one person about something bad that happened to them, that family or that person, because that's how you really connect, right? That's how you build a psychological connection with the person. So even if you've done 50 interviews, don't try and tell the story of 50 people, tell the story of like a small handful. And you can talk really compassionately and passionately about that. And that works fantastically well when it comes to, from a psychological breaking through that wall. It's like, hey, I'm talking about real people here. Yes, there's 50,000 of this person, so this is how we're going to make money. But let me tell you the story of Nina, who is a plumber in Oakland, California, and has this problem. You wouldn't believe how effective that is. So that's really one of the things to kind of focus on when it comes to your storytelling.
Great. That's a wonderful example. I've seen that as a VC be very compelling. And in fact, it gets even more compelling when that person is a user or a customer, and there'll be a reference call later. Like, weaving that in is a really, really powerful idea. I love that. Yes.
Yeah.
And so this slide can be easy, or this slide can be hard. This slide is easiest if you're doing something universal and it's a problem that everybody would know about. Okay. It's also very easy if this is a massive market. So again, looking at the 4P example, this is a sort of billing/CRM solution for plumbers. So Salesforce.com is a massive public CRM. They have big competitors like HubSpot, and there are many others. So there's a big market here. Okay. And so, you can kind of tease into that being a big market. And even actually, if you think back in time when Salesforce came about, when Salesforce pitched, there was a desktop slash I don't know, mainframe's that word, but like, behind the firewall solution. Siebel Systems was their big competitor. It was a huge business, right? So Salesforce's pitch was probably actually easier because they could point to a big market, and then they could list all the problems, just kind of like how Uber did. Like, that was probably a really great pitch for them, right? So it's your slide is way easier if there's a big market, or if it's a universal thing, right?
And if it isn't yet, you also have opportunities there. So the idea of predicates in markets is really helpful. So for example, when you first started pitching, or when Peloton first started pitching, it's a really good company, right? Now it becomes obvious, right? They're on TV all the time with their adverts. It's really obvious that this is a big company that's doing well. But when they first launched, they were like, how the hell do we tell this story of a $2,500 bike with a $60 a month subscription? How does that make any sense? Well, they had some really good predicates. One of them was exercise bikes in the home that already existed, right? They've been existing for a long time. And the other one was spin classes, stuff like SoulCycle and such. So they're able to say, hey, it's SoulCycle with real teachers, but at home with a screen, and with like the gamification of like being able to race against 10,000 other people. Suddenly that story comes together really well, because you've taken something that is a little bit abstract. It's like, nobody's going to buy a 2,500 bikes with a screen on it, to something that makes a lot of sense. So like, well, people do go to SoulCycle, but the people who really want to do this kind of thing but don't have time, like moms with young babies, like, can you get a 20-minute exercise in when the baby is sleeping, or really busy professionals? And there's all these kind of subsets of users that you can very easily point to that really want this product, but that didn't exist. And suddenly you come up with a really compelling narrative by just leaning on the predicates that exist in the market. Same thing for Salesforce, right? The predicate was the company that, to install it, you get shipped a DVD and you have to install it on your computer. And when there's an update, they have to ship 1 million DVDs around. Suddenly they say, well, what if it's all on the internet? What if it's all just completely available that way? And when the Salesforce is out and about, they can use their phones to quickly check the info about the person they're pitching and all that sort of thing. So think about how to use the predicates in the market and think about using adjacent products and that kind of stuff. Even if you're doing something completely new, even if you're Uber, there are other predicates you can use to help tell that story. The thing that people don't really realize is that Lyft was actually out there before Uber with the whole people's own cars thing. And Uber completely stole that idea and then out executed. But the cool thing is Lyft was doing something really innovative. Lyft wouldn't have been able to do it if Uber hadn't been there to do it with like their own fleet of cars. But then Uber took it and ran better. So you get this really cool back and forth within the macroeconomic market of the different type of products that are out there. And you can really lean on that in your story, because that is what brings it to life. That's what makes this seem real. And as a startup founder, you have to be a storyteller, you have to be a salesperson, and here's your opportunity, basically. And this slide is really where it starts. This is where the narrative begins.
So I do love the way you took the Salesforce pitch that I gave and made it better there. So I'm going to go do the Peloton one because I think that's brilliant as well. So for Peloton, first of all, there's the at-home part. You're a busy professional or a busy mom or something. You can't get to the Soul Cycle, but now you can do it at your house. Secondly, maybe the Soul Cycle coaches in your area are good, but they're not best in class, right? Like Peloton actually does probably have the best Peloton coaches on the planet, and you can get them on demand or on a schedule in your home. Pretty amazing. And then the third thing that they have is the gamification and the data and tracking your progress. I'm sure they pitch that as well in their deck as a way to kind of keep people coming back, keep them excited, badges, rewards, all that kind of stuff. So, again, that was a new market, but they just, bam, blew it out of the water, I bet, with their pitch, particularly if you look and see kind of how much money they've raised before they went public. Really successful. Now, where this becomes a much harder slide is when it's a totally new concept. That can be really hard. And it also is hard if you're not able to articulate who the buyer is or who the person is who has the problem with the issue, or who that person is who's going to be putting money down. And it's also hard if there's a cheap solution out there that is doing an okay job. That's another place where this slide gets really, really hard.
Yeah, totally. And I think a good example of that is the kind of at-home vacuuming robots, the iRobots type things. Before they started becoming available, it was like, guys, do we really need a little robot that goes around and hoovers when it isn't that big of a job to just vacuum your own floor? It's not that hard. I was actually a little bit surprised that so many people ended up buying them. But it turns out, I had missed something about that market. It is the convenience of being able to vacuum 3 times a week rather than just once a week. And I feel like sometimes even people who are really in these markets looking at stuff miss these big pieces of information. And I think as a founder, you get to inform your VC about stuff they don't know, and about trends you've seen and about things about the market. So think about that too. Sometimes saying really obvious stuff makes everybody feel really good because everybody agrees. And sometimes being a massive contrarian is a way that you're able to raise enormous amounts of money.
Right. And in the massive contrarian landscape, it's even better if you talk to a bunch of customers and you have some who are already paying you, who are willing to pay you. Obviously, it depends on the stage of your startup, but if you've talked to people who have the money in the pockets, the pocketbooks to pay for the solution, and you've already got them excited about it even before you've launched this slide gets a lot easier.
Yeah, absolutely.
Perfect. Well, I think we've done a pretty good job explaining what we'd like to put on the slide and where we've seen best in class. Again, you can get our free examples. Do you think we've missed anything, or should we just summarize this up for everybody?
Let me have a quick skim through this.
We could probably delete that part out here. Maybe we just delete that whole area there and we just go to the summary, unless you think there's something else you want to talk about. But yeah, keep going.
No, I think it's good. Let's do the summary.
Okay, cool. Sorry. Yeah. All right. So Curtis, we're going to just cut to the summary here. All right, great. Well, I think we've outlined what we'd like to see on this slide, where we've seen companies have a lot of success. So to summarize here, this is the most important slide in your deck. It's the first slide. If it's not compelling, you're probably not even getting a meeting. Okay.
Yeah.
So this is your excuse to get the venture capitalist to stop texting with their friends or CEOs about whatever's going on and actually put the phone down and focus on you. Okay. So you're selling. You are selling. This slide is selling. It's incredibly important. Next,
Yeah, super important.
remember your audience. Okay, remember that some of them may really know a lot about this. Other people may not. You've got to get them all in on this and all excited about the problem. And again, invite them to be the insider with you. Invite them to have this unique insight or angle that they hadn't had before. Okay. All right. You are explaining why this is a problem worth solving and why people are willing to pay for it. If that's what you're doing here, again, that's the thing that you're going to pull all the way through this, right? And so this is the hook slide, right? Keep it great, keep it pretty tight because you don't want to spend forever on this. You want to keep the slide moving forward. All right. And again, you can't spend 30 minutes on the slide in a meeting. That's probably not a good slide. That's probably not a good thing. You have a whole pitch deck to get through here, right? So it's got to be bam. It's got to lay it out there. It's got to get everybody excited. It's got to keep people moving.
This was a problem slide, and this is where you kind of set up all the pieces. And the obvious next step to go is the solution slide. How are you going to solve this problem in a way that makes the customers lean in and go, oh yeah, this makes sense. So we'll talk about that next. Thank you for joining us, and I look forward to seeing you in the next episode.